Good afternoon. Dear everybody, it is a huge pleasure to welcome you all on behalf of Maastricht University, their board and the board of the School of Business and Economics, to this academic ceremony here today in the aula of Maastricht University. My name is Marielle Heltjes. I'm the Dean of the Maastricht University School of Business and Economics, and I will serve as the pro-rector for this academic ceremony this afternoon. Welcome distinguished guests, and in particular, of course, Professor Bart Vos, who is, of course, the reason for all of us being here today. Welcome friends of Professor Vos, welcome family, of course, of Professor Vos, and all colleagues. It's really great to see so many of you enjoying this moment with us together. Now, although Professor Vos has held this chair since 2019, it's an occasion that will not only be a highlight to you, I think, but it's also a special event for all of us here at the School of Business Economics. And it's good to celebrate something like this, because we think that Professor Vos does not only bring a very extensive and impressive curriculum and experience to the school, but also, as I've heard, a lot of positive energy to everything that he does. So I am proud that I can start this ceremony not by giving him the floor immediately, but by introducing a bit of Professor Vos to you that I'm pretty sure he's not going to talk about himself in this inaugural address. So, and hopefully all the people here present will then also get to know you a little bit better beyond the academic achievements that undoubtedly you'll talk about. And I have to say a bit because even though I'm pro-rector of the ceremony, I've not been giving a lot of time to do so, and there's a lot to tell about Professor Vos. So how I'll do it is we ask colleagues about characteristics, and I'll highlight a few terms or phrases that are sort of common across all the reactions that we got and that characterize Bart. Now, first and foremost, the word that if I did like a word cloud would be popping up in capital, bright, bold letters is passion. Because almost everybody we asked mentioned this, and it shines through everything that Professor Vos does. It doesn't matter whether he's involved in an animated discussion with students, whether he's planning a train journey through Europe, whether he's presenting in national or regional media. People always mention his unmatched passion for supply chain management, and also for passing on to industry the knowledge that he gained in scientific research. A self-proclaimed pracademic who, as a scientific director at the helm of the Brightlands Institute for Supply Chain Innovation, which we in short call BISCI, is using this passion and a lot of perseverance, I think in this case, to successfully move this institute forward. Passion because he's a born educator, who with the same passion contributes to bringing our students in the Global Supply Chain Management and Change program to rate us with the highest possible scores on all 5 evaluation criteria of the Dutch choice guides for students, and of course resulting in a gold medal in the Dutch magazine EW. Now, the second term we consistently hear is warm or sociable. We collected many quotes on Bart in which it says that he really goes the extra mile for students, PhD students, but also for his postdocs. He sees the individual in every student and in every colleague. He supports them in their learning journey where possible, and seems to enjoy almost their achievements more than he enjoys his own. And it doesn't just limited himself to his students or colleagues, because everybody that knows him also knows how very fond and proud he is of his own children in this regard. Now, the third term is Brabant. It has come to my attention that you're wearing the Tilburg gown, but it has also come to the attention of your peers that you are a true Brabander. You're happy to work in Limburg, that's what you say. You tolerate your Limburg colleagues, have learned to work with them, but some colleagues tell me that they could have filled the remainder of this speech with jokes that you make about the Brabander versus the Limburger. And your position, I think, became abundantly clear when I did a small Google search on you as a person. And you actually said in an article, as someone from Brabant, well, Limburg is a nice second province. And then finally, the fourth word will surprise nobody. It's de Dijk. An avid fan of de Dijk, and by some you're called the singing professor. And I'm assuming that you're singing then the Dijk songs, which I'm not sure about, but... So it only seemed fitting to end my opening with a few wise words from de Dijk. Apologies for ending in Dutch, and beware, I will not sing them, but I'll just say them. I'll leave the singing to you later on during the reception. It's two verses that we thought were quite applicable to this occasion, and they're from the song Denk. And it goes, denk ruim, denk vrij, denk in het totaal. Denk door, denk na, denk aan allemaal. Denk alles wat je denken kan. Geef weg, geef vrij, geef om het totaal, geef door, geef voor, geef aan allemaal, geef alles wat je geven kan. Professor Dr. Ingenieur Bart Vos, the floor is yours to deliver your inaugural address entitled Images of Supply Chains, Transition Path Towards a Sustainable Future.
Okay, wow. This was supposed to take 1 minute. But thank you. Dear Pro-Rector, I start my speech, and don't improvise too much, then I will also take more time. Dear Pro-Rector, dear colleagues, dear friends, here in person today and also via the live stream. Welcome to my inaugural address. About time, indeed, over 3 years after my appointment in Maastricht. As you probably can imagine, a certain virus caused some delays. Of course, I could have done it online, but just like my colleague Fredo Schutanis from Utrecht University, I opted for a lecture in this beautiful aula, together with you all, family, friends, and colleagues. People who know me, indeed, may also wonder why there is no link to a Dijk song in the title. Just like the volcano dancing title of my address in 2004 in Tilburg. I come back to the drawings later. Especially now my heroes stop after rocking for over 40 years. It would certainly have been appropriate to make such a link once more. Still this time, I decided to refer to Dijk songs throughout the text. So keep paying attention. I will make it easy for you. It actually already starts with a song from 1987. It's a bit visualized here. Wakker in een vreemde wereld. Loosely translated as Something Waking Up in a Strange World. A title which is sadly enough still very appropriate nowadays. In our supply chain domain, we call this VUCA. Volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous. I only have to refer to the COVID-19 pandemic and the ongoing war in the Ukraine to illustrate this reality. And more specifically, a single container ship stranded in the Suez Canal, March 21, caused major disruptions in global supply chains in many industries. And it's actually quite likely that a lot of you faced the consequences. Maybe, for example, in the form of late deliveries, maybe without explicitly knowing the root causes. It's, however, despite this visual, not my intention to give a very gloomy inaugural address, just like the two grumpy old men from the Muppet Show. But sometimes I do feel like the milkman in another Dijk classic, Milkman with the Blues. 30 years old, but still all too true. Het rommelt in de verte, het komt al maar dichterbij. And although it's difficult to ignore that approaching rumbling, my idea rather is to sketch some potential transition paths to more sustainable supply chains. A quest I already started in Tilburg almost 20 years ago. In doing so, two concepts play a crucial role. The first one is the phenomenon of co-creation. Also prominent in the inaugural speech, yes, of my Fontes colleague Victor Verbuket, and an indirect link to another Dijk hit, Niemand kan het alleen. Nobody can do it alone. That is for sure true for the supply chain domain dealing with major transitions ahead of us, requiring the active involvement of many groups of stakeholders. I'll come back to that later on. But it also applies to this address itself. Probably not surprising, not singing, but I will do the talking. But the visuals on the screen are mostly made by my very talented son, Luc. So enjoy. Thank you. Thank you. I was planning to do it later on, but we can do it another time. Next, during the reception, after this address, Nienke, my daughter, will play a keyboard. So you can all enjoy that. And now you wonder, but doesn't he have a third child? Yes, he does. And that's my Eline. And she will play a crucial, yet indirect role in the intermezzo I plan to do together with you. So co-creation at work by the Fox family. Now I have to see, okay. So the second core concept underlying this address, no, that's a bit too early, is the power of metaphors. Yet you think you prepare something and then you still have, these surprises. In general, I love to use them in my teaching and speeches. More specifically, the inspiration of this title comes from this book, the images of Supply Chain of Gareth Morgan. I was introduced to this book when I started in Tilburg in 1995, 2 years after completing my PhD in Eindhoven, and it intrigued me, and it still does so today. Morgan describes 8 metaphors, each providing a different perspective on organizing operations. I will briefly outline 5 of them later on. Why? Well, I feel these metaphors can be very useful to understand both the potential but also the challenges in our journey to make supply chains more sustainable. And in case you still wonder why that is needed in the first place, let me give you 2 illustrations. The first one is the Earth Overshoot Day phenomenon. It's actually, it marks the date when humanity's demand for ecological resources and services in a given year exceeds what Earth can regenerate in that same year. As you can see on the slide, it landed on July 28 this year, and when the measurement started in 1971, it was around Christmas. And this is the global average. For example, the organizer of the World Soccer Championships, Qatar, has the questionable honor to be the country with the earliest overshoot day this year, early January. So keep that in mind. And one may argue, well, we are here, alive and kicking, in this beautiful Ola. And literally speaking, that's true. Still, this overshoot day concept is an alarming indicator of the limits of economic models purely based on growth. Second example comes from an authority when it comes to our planet Earth, Sir David Attenborough. In his fascinating book, he uses some key performance indicators, KPIs, related to the health of our planet. Well, he doesn't actually call them KPIs, but we supply chain nerds, supply chain nerd, would label them as such. Back in 1937, 11-year-old Sir David already loved to explore the British countryside on his bike, excited to discover fossils of sea animals hidden in stones. And in those days, the world population was 2.3 billion, the carbon level 280 parts per million, and the percentage of world nature equaled 66. And on the slide you can see how that deteriorated over time. And the United Nations predicts that around this time our world population will hit the 8 billion milestone later this year. Obviously one can quarrel about the rationale for precisely these indicators and their definition, but the deteriorating long-term trend is clear. So, Sir David Attenborough must be a very pessimistic, worried person. Well, I would almost say on the contrary. He actually is optimistic that we as Homo sapiens, although I question the sapiens part sometimes, can still visualize and realize a healthy planet for future generations. To make this happen, we only need the willpower to do so. In this spirit, I intend to sketch some pathways how our supply chain management domain can contribute to this global challenge. And how will I do that? Nice, huh? Okay, well, the structure of this address is like a dinner with 5 courses, and hopefully for you, I'm able to serve this in an enjoyable and inspiring way on this Friday afternoon when the sun is shining outside. And you can, of course, enjoy Luke's visuals. So this introduction serves as a starter, followed by the first main course in a description of some images of supply chains. In the interest of time, I will limit myself to 5 of Morgan's set of 8 metaphors. And next, it's time for an intermezzo. And in dinner terms, we would call that a spoon. This is also the course where I would like to create some interaction. No, it won't hurt. It won't hurt. I just want you to reflect on some daily life decisions. And Eline is my guiding person in that. And after the spoon, it's time for the second main course, which I would like to label as fusion cooking. The idea is to apply these rather abstract metaphors of Morgan to concrete examples of BISCI projects. Thank you, Pro-Rector, for already mentioning what BISCI means. I'll come back to that later on. Finally, there's, of course, dessert. This will cover some concluding reflections and words of thanks. The latter will take some time. Actually, in one of the first versions of the invitation, I was already it was labeled as a farewell address, so okay, so, but doing this thing at 58, at the age 58, implies that it can almost be seen as a farewell speech. So, I may have an answer to an until now unresolved riddle from the music world at the end. This is what they call a sort of teaser, huh? So, okay. Let's start the main course with the first image, a supply chain as a machine. Watch also the details. I won't explain them all, but there is some time to look at this. This is probably the most well-known one, with Charlie Chaplin's classic 1936 movie Modern Times as iconic example. In one of the movie's most famous scenes, Chaplin gets stuck in a giant machine, throwing the entire factory into chaos. The worker stress due to highly repetitive work is a major downside of a classical focus on making supply chains more efficient, organizing all activities like a clockwork, or to use another metaphor, a perfect relay race. All handovers between parties involved go smooth, and we are fully in control. Of course, until a breakdown, like the one shown in Modern Times, occurs. The movie is, of course, old, yet we still see a lot of examples of this machine metaphor around us. Not only in manufacturing, like for example the car industry, but also in service environments. I would like to take a fast food restaurant, I'm not going to mention names, as an example from Morgan's book. All activities are planned in a meticulous way, even the ones that involve personal interaction. Employees are trained to interact with customers based on detailed sets of instructions and also monitored in their performance. So a service with a smile could be, but most likely one that is driven by corporate policies and rehearsed to generate authentic results. By the way, just like this inaugural address. I also rehearsed it, did you? Yes, I did. Okay. It will be clear that the machine metaphor has its limitations, especially in the VUCA world. A predominantly mechanistic supply chain can still work can work fine in stable times, but in more turbulent times, the mantra will not hold anymore. So time to introduce second metaphor, a supply chain functioning like an organism. It's also next visual. Let's ponder about an ideal world for a while. Just use your imagination, or visualize, as our coach of the Dutch national soccer team, Louis van Gaal, would call it. Wouldn't it be great if our supply chains are fully aligned with the needs of the environment it operates in, like a chameleon? This one. I love it, Luke. Well, not if you're a big fan of bureaucracy, of course, but especially in the high-tech industry, this actually already is the name of the game. And that's what we conceptually call contingency thinking. Simply said, there is no best machine-like way of operating. It all depends on the needs of the relevant environment. It is about realizing the best possible fit between the supply chain's output and its demand, also in view of changing circumstances. And this image borrows a lot from biology and ecology, building on Darwin's evolution theory notion that ultimately the strongest supply chain will eliminate the weaker ones. And yes, coming from the Eindhoven region, from Brabant, I would like to use the story of ASML as an illustrative example. This high-tech giant started less than 40 years ago in 1984, fun fact, 1 year after the introduction of the first mobile phone, younger generation, pay attention, and as a spin-off from Philips, specializing in the development and manufacturing of advanced systems to produce computer chips. And currently, it's the world's largest supplier of such systems, primarily for the semiconductor industry. It employs over 31,000 people and counting, and from a supply chain perspective, its network has more than 4,600 first-tier suppliers. And I think this is an impressive performance in a very competitive industry, reflecting ASML's innovative capabilities, enabling them to outperform competitors like Canon and Nikon in satisfying the needs of very, very demanding customers. And like all metaphors, this organism, one has limitations. One being the danger that this becomes an ideology, serving as normative guidelines for shaping practices. And as Morgan describes elegantly in his chapter on an image I will not discuss in detail today, the one on culture, organizations operating in supply chains can be seen as socially constructed phenomena. There are many hard material assets in our supply chains, examples being machines, buildings, IT systems, but at the end of the day, the difference is typically made by us, by human beings. In other words, it's about the human touch. I will use that term more often. And I borrow this one from the inaugural address of my colleague, Professor Leentje Volker of Twente University, maybe joining via the live stream. And it's time with this human touch to introduce a third image, the brain, representing the power of information processing. The brain image is in essence based on the idea that our gray cells are in fact an information processing system. And needless to say that this is vital in a VUCA world. Double loop learning mechanisms are needed since these involve the questioning of what existing norms are appropriate. It is actually the idea behind the Japanese concept of Kaizen, focusing on continuous improvement. And this may sound logical, yet it does require an organizational mindset actively encouraging learning and change. And Kaizen aims to institutionalize the challenging of taken for granted norms and practices, stimulating our creativity and often requiring our brains to develop new mindsets. And our human brains, fortunately, increasingly are supported by advanced IT, resulting from enormous progress in the field of information management. And all these digital tools can be seen as extensions of our human brain, as visualized by Luc, hence increasing our information processing capabilities. I will discuss some applications of digital tools in the second main course of this address using examples from ongoing BISCI projects. It is, however, important to stress the support nature of these tools. And in this sense, I follow the reasoning of my colleague, Professor Jan van Soo, in his recent inaugural address in Tilburg, and he stated that the role of humans in supply chain decision-making is still very much alive, with humans making use of systems rather than the other way around. Now, the alternatives to the classic machine metaphor, organism and brain, are predominantly positive from the perspective of making fundamental transitions. And yes, I'm in general a positive person. It's now time to introduce two more gloomy images, starting with the psychic prison. Yeah. This idea originates from Plato's allegory of the cave, where Socrates addresses the relationships among appearance, reality, and knowledge. Let me try to give a brief description of this allegory. It pictures, like on the screen, an underground cave with a burning fire and inmates being chained, preventing them to move. And this reality is their reality is created by the shadows on the wall of the cave. And also talking about them and probably even linking sounds from outside with movements on the wall. In the words of Elvis Presley, they're caught in a trap. They can't get out. What would happen if one of the inmates is allowed to leave the cave, as visualized by Luc? Well, Socrates argued that he would see that the world out there is far more complex than the shadowy world inside. And still, when returning to the cave, it's very likely that his fellow inmates will not accept this other view of reality. They may actually see this outside world as a dangerous place, or even fooling or acting hostile towards the messenger of the news. And translating this to corporate life, this image implies that organizations become trapped by constructed perceptions of reality, making it difficult to change. And in this respect, especially the link with theory of transitional phenomena is relevant. The underlying idea is that in order to make a change stick, humans frequently need time to reflect about the value of new practices. In other words, what is the added value of new ways of working? You will most likely recognize that in your personal life as well. I certainly do. It's not really that easy to abandon old habits or patterns. It isn't. Morgan provides a suggestion to support individuals or groups in making effective transition paths happen, the change agent. And in doing so, it's essential that such intermediates help organizations to let go what is dear to them before they can move on to a new desirable situation. And this will require more from a change agent than merely selling a change package or a set of techniques. People involved in the change process, for example, the journey towards sustainable supply chains, should also be supported in internalizing this change. Later on, I will provide some examples to illustrate that our biscuit can act as such a change agent. But let me first introduce my final image for today, the ugly face. And no, that's not personal, but professional. To keep that in mind. Now, and this one, wow. By way, I'm not going to sing. By way of introducing, because I'm not only a fan of the deck. By way of introducing the final metaphor, I would like to quote some lines of the obscure Fischl Z song, or Fischl Z, that's up to you, Multinationals Bite, from the '91 album with the gloomy title, Red Skies Over Paradise. You don't realize the extent of their power. I can't help you anymore, and you'll find out. Multinationals bite, bite, bite. They'll destroy you overnight. I hear war drums picking up pieces of blood for you now. Not too bad. Probably lead singer John Watts was not aware of it, but this is an almost perfect illustration of the ugly face image. Viewing organizations as instruments of domination. In doing so, Morgan pays explicit attention to the role of multinationals, but I would like to stress that multinationals are not by definition evil. Actually, in the past decades, more attention is paid to non-economic issues. The acronym often used is Triple P. People, planet, and profit. But this address is not meant to name and shame individual companies, although you may recognize a logo on this picture. Yet the sad and inconvenient truth is that multinationals often still put the financial bottom line above ecological and social issues. And now, I will, in the interest of time, I will share some of Morgan's general reflections on this metaphor. First of all, it's important to stress that this image can actually be seen as an extension of the political metaphor. Think about the impact of different sets of interests, conflicts, and power in shaping activities in organizations. And these dynamics are present everywhere, but are bound to be more pronounced in global settings. Next, some multinationals can truly be labeled as world powers themselves, with market values that exceed the gross national incomes of many nations, including the Netherlands. And finally, this ugly face metaphor can be seen as a rather extreme form of left-wing ideology. Still, as Morgan observes, actually all images are inherently ideological, tending to give rather one-sided views. Okay, time for an intermezzo. Enough talking. I will keep talking. But after introducing these images of supply chains, it's time for an intermezzo. Starring my daughter Elena. Well, I actually take her as an example of an individual consumer, in her case, a poor student, having to make difficult choices every day. So, I would like all of you to stand. Rise, please. Thank you. Very good. That works. That's important. Thanks you for participating. It won't hurt. I promise you. Okay, so it's actually simple. I will give you a few examples of choices Eline has to make on an almost daily basis, each one with only 2, keep it simple, answer options. For one answer, you can keep standing, and for the other one, you can sit down. And please, please, do not give politically correct or socially desirable answers. It's really about what you would do in that situation. Okay, clear. Let's start with the first choice. After waking up, Eline can opt for a cup of coffee or tea. Who fancies a cup of tea? Hands, please. Okay, or you can keep standing. All the others, sit down, please. Yeah. Oh, by the way, I would take a cup of coffee, but I cannot sit down. So it's not possible, not allowed. But in general, keep standing. No problem. In general, a cup of tea is the more healthy and ecological friendly choice. Yet in reality, this may not always be the case. It, for example, depends on the amount of water one boils to make 1 cup of tea, personal preferences, and certainly also the specific brand. And some being more sustainable than others. I'll come back to that later on. Next. My daughter, Eline, she also wants to stay healthy. She really does. She's now seated. Okay, sort of. I know some of her habits, of course, being her father. She's tempted to take some exotic mango pieces in the fridge. But she can also choose for a Dutch apple. Who opts for the mango? Hands, please.
What's the other?
Apple, a Dutch apple. Okay, no, those seated they're not in the race anymore. So the ones opting for the mango can be seated. And the ones for the apple can, okay. Oh, we keep some people, okay, good, very good. In general, no worries. In general, it makes sense. For those, if you are an avocado lover, pay attention. Because it's not very avocado friendly. But the mango, on all criteria, water usage, land usage, and CO2 emission is the better choice compared to a mango. So the apple is a better choice. And these are data from the Food and Agriculture Organization of the UN. However, again, other factors like personal preferences are bound to influence final decision making. So now it becomes tricky, dear people standing, and really no socially desirable answers. Now it really becomes tricky. Final choice. So how will my daughter go from her house in Eindhoven to her steady location in Tilburg? And due to all the difficult choices she already had to make in the early morning, Eline is already a bit late. So what shall she do? Take her mother's regular Euro 95 car or use her free student OV card? And assuming that buses and trains keep running, and I know, so not bothered by, I know. I'm not bothered by disruptions like strikes and so. So keep standing. And no socially designed, keep standing if you prefer the OV solution. Otherwise, if you take the car, sit down. Oh my golly. Oh, yeah, no, okay, no car, okay, right, okay. Yeah, no, that I could have noted that. Okay, so for those still standing, I'm going to make it a little bit more challenging. And keep in mind, it's Eline, so you say she does have a car. So there is a car available, so it reflects her situation. So I make it a bit more difficult. She has a very important exam. Very important exam. And she has to take bus, train, bus. What shall she do? So if you still go for the OV, keep standing. If you go for the car, sit down. Okay, thank you. Well, applause for the few heroes that keep standing. Thank you. And all can sit down. Thank you. Okay. What's the morale of this spoon? Thank you. Also to energize you a little bit. I see that my time management is lousy, but you also took a few more minutes. But anyhow, it's not easy. It's not easy to quote Kermit the Frog from the Muppet Show, to be green. That's the morale. So in general, it's not easy to make sustainable choices. Moreover, it's virtually impossible to be perfect in everything we do. So it's really not a problem. So if you sat down before the end of my examples. And I would once more like to refer to a recent interview with Fredo. in our professional magazine deal, because it was so nicely. He states that at home they have become more conscious. For example, by taking public transportation or bicycles in Utrecht as much as possible, and by not eating meat every day anymore. But he's honest in stating that he is not more Roman than the Pope. And I think that applies to all of us. It definitely does to me. Thanks once more. I will skip this one in the interest of time. And I think I'm going to Bisky. Again, also with some other illustrations of Luc. Some of them you've seen already. One will come. And I hope I will now discuss some examples of Bisky projects. But I first would like to give a short introduction to Bisky. The pro-rector already did a little bit, but I would like to expand a little bit more. It's the Brightlands Institute for Supply Chain Innovation. It officially started on the Greenport campus in Venlo on September 1, 2019. And we started with a core team of 5 persons. By now, we have a team of over 30 professionals from our partner organizations, Maastricht University, Fontes Venlo, and TNO. And moreover, we acknowledge the support from the province of Limburg, I see Caroline there, not only by providing us a so-called kennis-as subsidy, but also by an active role in various projects. And these projects, they should fit with our mission to develop and realize smart and sustainable supply chain innovations. And we do so by orchestrating resources and expertise from knowledge institutions, industry, and governments, nowadays called the Triple Helix. In essence, Bisky is about building bridges, to use another metaphor, in the spirit of Roman water management over 2,000 years ago. Aqueducts like the Pont du Gard shown on this slide can be seen as examples of extraordinary supply chain innovations. And Bisky aims to build bridges between these triple helix parties to realize societal impact via knowledge development, transfer, and implementation. As said, we do so with a dedicated team of professionals, but we can also benefit from the contributions from our Fontes Venlo and Maastricht University students. So just over 3 decades after our launch, the Bisky portfolio consists of a couple of dozen projects in different industries and regions. And I will now give 3 examples of Bisky projects aimed at making supply chains more sustainable. And I would like to stress that this is my personal reflection on these projects. So, the first project is actually about our involvement in the Healthy Primary School of the Future initiative, with a leading role by my colleague Victor Verboeket, Lector Supply Chain Innovation at Fontes Venlo. And financially, a small project in our portfolio, but one with considerable societal relevance and impact. And the idea behind this initiative is actually quite straightforward. Make young children familiar with the healthy lifestyle, and they will take that lifestyle with them while growing up. And a more indirect effect is that people in the children's environment, parents, other family members, are also positively affected by this lifestyle. It started with a pilot project involving free healthy lunches at 4 primary schools in Parkstad in the southern part of Limburg. And the results of these pilots were very promising in terms of improving the participating children's health indicators like BMI. One of the remaining challenges concerns the cost of these lunches, partly caused by a quite complex supply chain to organize these lunches. So in our Bisky project, we developed an Excel tool to analyze the financial consequences of different supply chain designs, taking into account the wish to use local seasonal products as much as possible. And the results increased our insights into the financial impact of parameters like the number of participating schools and the use of professional employees versus volunteers. And our analysis showed that scale matters, especially when schools are geographically concentrated, and that the use of volunteers is obviously highly recommended from a financial perspective. So, in terms of my metaphors, in terms of the images, there is almost a textbook example of the brain metaphor, involving the development of a tool to support human decision-making. But the biggest hurdles to be overcome are bound to come from the culture and psychic prison metaphors. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not calling primary schools psychic prisons. That's not the idea. But introducing a new product practice, in this case a healthy way of living, is bound to encounter opposition in the spirit of Plato's cave. And in this sense, it's positive. That since early 2022, a major Dutch retailer is responsible for the delivery of lunches to participating primary schools in Limburg. And schools order via customized web portal, enabling them to have control over the required numbers of lunches in order to minimize the amount of waste. There are still child diseases like technical hiccups, but retailer and schools work in close collaboration to fine-tune their supply chain. Next. I like this so much. I would like to introduce our smart packaging, related to the school. Smart packaging project with Tom Schiefer, as a PhD student, and my colleague Robert Suurmond as co-supervisor. This project started early 2020 as part of a bigger consortium of knowledge institutions and companies. Smart packaging can be seen as a promising form of digital supply chain innovation, enabling real-time updates on the status of products. And being part of this research consortium enables us to monitor the smart packaging implementation process in 3 different supply chains: high-tech, healthcare, and food. And this results in a rich longitudinal data, sorry for the jargon, consisting of interviews, focus group meetings, observations, and secondary data. Tom is still working hard on the analysis of these data as part of his PhD, to be completed next year, but the first results point at interesting differences between industries. The high-tech and health cases look promising, with functional prototypes being ready for ramping up in their supply chain operations. But ironically, the case with the highest potential for sustainability improvements, the food supply chain, is the one which was terminated after about halfway our research project. And as a researcher, and I've been there before, this results in mixed emotions. On the one hand, it's a pity that we could not complete the data collection and analysis process for this pilot project. On the other hand, it created an opportunity to execute an ex-post evaluation on the rationale for terminating this project. In essence, the conclusion of this evaluation was that the participating food company had other strategic priorities for which they needed the capacity of the employees involved in our pilot. As such, this was understandable from a business perspective, since the smart packaging application would not be economically feasible in the short run. Still, this was known from the beginning of our project. So for the consortium, it was disappointing that this pilot could not be completed. It would have been so interesting, to execute a small-scale test for this smart packaging solution with sensors to measure time and temperature of food products. In the supply chain between retailers and consumers, working with such dynamic expiration date creates opportunities for presenting food waste. So, from the perspective of Morgan's images again, these demonstrate that smart technology is promising, but it's not sufficient to make supply chains more sustainable. And I admit that this food case is not the ugliest of the ugly face metaphor, yet at the end of the day, different business interests led to the decision to terminate this pilot. So I can only hope that such hurdles can be overcome, since in the food industry there is actually a profound need for innovative smart packaging solutions. Yeah, getting there. The final, also very nice. The final project I would like to present today is our Fair and Smart Data Initiative, FSD. Some of you may have attended the hybrid event prior to this inaugural address. And the FSD project was launched in 2021 as one of our school's spearhead projects, aiming to improve the living conditions of smallholder farmers in the so-called Global South. And the underlying idea is to use smart data technologies, new business models, and good governance of global value networks as drivers for systemic change. Besides various entities of Maastricht University, we are very happy with and proud of the collaboration with our external partners Solidaridad and Rabobank in this FSD consortium. And this ambitious spearhead project is really a long-term research journey, stretching at least until 2025. In the interest of time, I will now restrict myself to some general observations. And let me start by observing that in the current business reality of smallholder farms, data does not seem to play an important role. And taking the perspective of the ugly face, once more, farmers are often the lowest value receiver in the total global supply chain. Dominant actors higher up in the supply chain, producers, retailers, primarily collect data for their own purposes. And with farmers sharing these data without realizing their value. Digital technologies can play a crucial role in creating smart data to increase transparency and traceability throughout global supply chains for commodities like coffee, cacao, and many more. Smart data should eventually also become fair data, assuring that smallholder farmers get properly rewarded for the value these data have for producers and retailers. Sounds idealistic? Yeah? Thanks for the... Maybe so, but let me briefly share the experiences of one of our FSD researchers in the back, CDMR, joining colleagues from our partner Solidaridad, there he is, in a recent field trip to Malawi. CD could observe that the farmers in Malawi's rural areas are increasingly using digital tools in their activities. And Solidaridad's digital advisor joining this field trip told CD that, I quote, 10 years ago, I would have never thought this could happen. So, the digitalization of small-scale farming opens many opportunities to smallholder farmers in Africa and other global south regions, enabled by improvements in the ICT infrastructure. However, this extended brain capacity alone may not be enough to address prevailing power imbalances in global value chains. Hence, I can fully relate to CD's final statement in his blog. How can we make the situation better for smallholder farmers? We have the knowledge, we have the technology, we have the finance, and we have the needs. So what's the missing link? Our FSD spearhead may not result in the answer to this fundamental question, but I'm convinced that our ongoing research with support from the partners I mentioned will yield valuable results in this respect. I'm aware, really aware, that this short FSD description does not do justice to the richness of ongoing research in this spearhead. Still, this project is precious to me for both personal and professional reasons. On a personal level, my interest in challenges of the Global South was actually the main reason to start studying industrial engineering management science in Eindhoven back in 1982, eventually resulting in my master thesis project for a drinking water company in Indonesia in 1987. But from a professional perspective, FSD fits our business mission like a glove, aiming to develop and implement smart and sustainable supply chain innovations. So I would like to recommend you to track the progress of our FSD spearheads. It's actually quite easy to find them on the internet. Okay, time for my dessert in my dinner metaphor, starting with some concluding reflections. First, sustainability is a complex, multifaceted phenomenon. And this is also reflected in the title of a recent inaugural address of my colleague, Yvonne van der Meer. How sustainable is it? That's the question. As you can imagine, there is no uniform answer to that question, not in Yvonne's field of chemicals and materials, let alone in a broader context. The sustainability journey is bound to be industry and firm specific, as we could already see in the smart packaging project example. Conceptually, the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs of the United Nations, can be a very useful capstone to set priorities. And of course, these goals are still quite broad, yet each SDG is further broken down into specific targets. And for the supply chain management domain, I think it's obvious that SDG 12, responsible consumption and production, is the most logical, is the most relevant one. Other generically relevant SDGs are 9, innovation-driven, and 17, partnership-driven. For our FSD consortium is actually a very good example of a multi-stakeholder partnership initiative. And the relevance of other SDGs, also very relevant for our global future, is as said industry and firm specific. But I see more examples of companies using these SDGs. And I also use it in my teaching to train the new generation. For me, it's clear that transition path to a more sustainable supply chains should move away from the traditional efficiency-driven machine image. In doing so, the organism and brain metaphors can be guiding principles to make this happen, benefiting from the progress made in information management. Still, the ugly face and psychic present metaphors are bound to act as spoilers in this transition process. So, who is going to win this battle of the images? A bear and a bull. Who's going to win? Well, I think for me it's obvious. Well, I don't know if the bear is stronger than the bull, but for me the brain, in my terminology, the brain should win. And especially if Sir David Attenborough is right to trust the brains, the sapiens part of Homo sapiens. Still, when looking at the Earth overshoot day trend and the KPIs on Mr. Attenborough's dashboard, one can doubt our capabilities to make fundamental changes happen. Our economic models are still predominantly growth-driven, hence denying the boundaries of our planet. So keep watching, I would say. Reaching the end of my address as promised, I would like to thank some people. The efforts of supply chain organizations to become more sustainable can be seen as a journey. And that actually applies also to my career as well. I'm grateful for the support I got from many co-creators along the way, a lot present here in this aula. I will mention a few, while acknowledging the support of many, many more. And I will switch to Dutch for this final part. Uiteraard wil ik beginnen met mijn ouders. Ze zijn er helaas niet meer bij. En dit is wat ik in mijn intrede in 2004 het niemand in de stad gevoel noemde. En net als bij live optredens van de Dijk is mijn lijstje van dierbaren die ons ontvallen zijn alleen maar langer geworden. En ik heb er vanmorgen nog met mijn goede vriendin José. Ik ga ervan uit dat onder aanvoering van ons mam daarboven vandaag ook wel een feestje zal zijn. Denk ik. Vervolgens was mijn studie een promotieperiode aan de TU in Eindhoven van groot belang voor mijn verdere loopbaan. En in 2004 ben ik al ingegaan op de cruciale rol van mijn doctorvader, de helaas ook veel te jong overleden Toon van de Ven. En vandaag wil ik ook Dick van Damme, Dick, waar ben je? Ja, hallo Dick. En Sander de Leeuw, dit is een vrij uniek moment, want wij zijn samen de 3 promovendi van onze wijle promotor Ploos en Amstel. Super dat jullie er vandaag bij zijn. Daarna volgde een periode van 20 jaar Universiteit van Tilburg. Ik was in die periode, heb ik vele rollen mogen vullen. En het is echt onmogelijk om alle collega's te noemen waar ik mee samen heb gewerkt. Een paar mensen verdienen echter een bijzondere vermelding. Daarbij wil ik beginnen met mijn maatje, met Arno de Schepper. Het is super dat je er hierbij bent. Ja, je hebt een beslissende rol gespeeld bij mijn aanstelling als hoogleraar in 2003. Ik zie hem denken, ja, daar lig ik nog steeds wakker van. Maar ja, daarnaast hebben we vele jaren samen logistiek en inkooponderwijs mogen zorgen. Dat deden we met onze eigen boek. Jawel. Dynamiek en logistiek, uiteraard samen met, ja, Freek, waar heb je... Ja, ik zie, ja, probeer je maar niet te verbergen. Samen met onze onverprezen co-auteur Freek Aartsen. En kijk, toen waren we nog jong. Ja, dat heb je als die boeken... Ja, dat, lang geleden dus. Hè? Maar goed, en we zijn er ook niet rijk van geworden, maar wel veel lol gehad. Dus super dus dat je er samen, Arno, dat je er met Joke bij bent. En ook Freek en Lisette natuurlijk. En vervolgens ben ik heel blij... wil ik mijn Tilburgse collega's Wendy van der Valk, Henk Akkermans en Bert Meijboom bedanken. Voor de prettige professionele samenwerking in vele projecten, maar vooral ook voor jullie vriendschap. Fijn dus dat jullie er vandaag bij zijn, hoewel ik Henk nog niet gezien heb, maar die zal wel weer te laat zijn, sorry. Dit was een inside joke. Dat zal je me niet kwalijk nemen. Dan is het tijd voor het hier en nu. Ruim 3 jaar geleden verruilde ik Tilburg dus voor Maastricht, of beter gezegd, ik ben feitelijk verleid. Verleid door mijn huidige collega's Gabi Oudekerk-Schreuder en Frank Rozenmeijer. En het grappige was, ik had aanvankelijk helemaal niet in de gaten dat ze mij voor die rol wilden hebben. Gewoon niet door, het heeft een hele tijd geduurd. Dank Gabi via de livestream, Frank hier aanwezig. voor jullie vertrouwen en voor de nog voortdurende samenwerking. En dat geldt uiteraard in algemene zin voor de collega's binnen het departement marketing en supply chain management. Insbesondere möchte ich gern Dominik Ma bedanken. Du bist nicht nur unser Head of Department, aber auch sehr wichtig für mich persönlich. Danke vielmals. Dat was het wel weer voor Duits. Goed. En natuurlijk onze secretaresses Nicole en Pascal. Mede dankzij jullie voelde deze Brabo zich inderdaad welkom in Limburg. Ja, een goede tweede. Dat heeft de pro-rector al weggenomen. Ook toen we al vrij snel na mijn komst te maken kregen met een cyberaanval en coronapandemie. En dat maakt het opstarten en uitbouwen van Bisky ook niet bepaald makkelijker. Maar zoals ik al eerder zei, is dat best aardig gelukt. Heel veel dank dus voor mijn mede-Biskianen van het eerste uur. Ton, Kars, Tom en Nicole Goor. En zeker ook Nick Bos. We hebben Nick's steun vanuit het college van bestuur altijd gevoeld. En vooral Ton heeft natuurlijk een cruciale, als onze businessdirecteur, ja, als je alleen met zo'n wetenschappelijke directeur het moet doen, dan gaat het niet worden. Dus maar als onze businessdirecteur een cruciale rol gespeeld bij het uitbouwen van onze portfolio. But of course I would also like the entire truly international whisky team we have today. And we really make it work together. And I would especially like to thank Grant and Schreiers in the back somewhere for their fantastic work in keeping the Bisky machine and brains going. En ja, verder, is ook al genoemd, ja, ben ik de trotse programmaleider van onze Master Global Supply Chain Management and Change in Venlo. En ja, ik ben heel trots op die gouden medaille van Elsevier, echt wel. En dat is teamwerk, hè, dat doe je met z'n allen. En Tjark, dichtstbij, natuurlijk het dichtstbij. Ik herinner me onze eerste ontmoeting in of all places. De stationsrestauratie van Eindhoven. Ja, nog heel goed. En binnen een paar minuten hadden we door dat we allebei een heel groot onderwijshart hebben. Ik ben dan ook blij dat je nog steeds deel uitmaakt van Team Global. En dat geldt zeker ook voor mijn overige docenten aanwezig hier. En zeker ook voor de collega's van Campus Venlo. Vanaf het begin heb ik me heel welkom gevoeld in de Nassaustraat. Dank daarvoor. Tja, en dat onderwijs, dat doen we natuurlijk voor onze studenten. Ik prijs mij gelukkig dat ik in Eindhoven, Tilburg en Venlo met vele honderden, vermoedelijk zelfs duizenden, nu gaan mijn kinderen doen, maar ik denk dat het toch wel waar is, heb me ook samenwerken. En voor mij blijft het fantastisch om een bijdrage te kunnen leveren aan het leerproces van jonge mensen binnen ons vakgebied. En dat hoop ik inderdaad met veel passie nog een aantal jaren te blijven doen. Want ik ga nog niet met pensioen. Nee. Een speciale groep van studenten, zelf zie ik ze meer als collega's, wordt gevormd door mijn promovendi. Ook een aantal hier aanwezig. Veel dank dus Mark, Jeroen, Mieneke, Petra, Feng en meest recent Paulien voor de samenwerking. Smart Packaging, Tom, gaat de laatste fase van zijn promotiereis in en Lonneke en Hanna zitten nog in de startfase. Ja. En dan kom ik nu wordt het waarschijnlijk even moeilijk, belangrijke mensen in mijn privéomgeving. De laatste jaren waren voor mij niet altijd makkelijk. En wat is het dan fijn om een groep hechte vrienden en vriendinnen te hebben. Recent las ik in een artikel dat de mooiste vriendschappen vaak gedurende lange tijd gerijpt zijn. Dat kan ik bevestigen. Ik ga niet iedereen noemen, dat doen we vanavond wel. Maar dat jullie bedankt zijn te weten. Moet ik daar vertalen? Nee, ik denk het niet. Verder kennen natuurlijk mijn kinderen. Luc, Nienke en Eline. Vandaag heeft iedereen kunnen genieten van de fantastische plaatjes van Luc. Ja, dat past niet in het protocol, sorry daarvoor. En straks de muziek van Nienke. Maar uiteraard ben ik een trotse papa. Van jullie alle 3. En super blij ook met Hilve, Kevin en Arend. De momenten samen worden minder, nu jullie je eigen pad kiezen. En zo hoort het ook. Maar in de geest van de dijk geldt wel, groot zijn de momenten waar het allemaal om gaat. Dat kan maar gezegd zijn. En dan, wat een vrouw niet kan doen. Maar ja. We kennen elkaar pas een paar maanden en wauw, het voelt al zo vertrouwd. Ik had niet verwacht, eerlijk niet, dat dit geluk nog op mijn pad zou komen. En daar mogen we mijn Fontis-collega Victor en zijn Maud heel hartelijk voor bedanken. Zij zagen de match. Weer een voorbeeld van de human touch. En daar kan wat mij betreft geen Tinder of first dates tegenop. Okay, and now really, I keep sticking with these ugly, yeah, thank you. Okay, no, the magic word has not been said. And now really to conclude, really. As announced at the start, I'm going to answer the riddle included in the song by the Norwegian one-hit wonder duo Ylvis. Since its release in 2013, their song got over 1 billion views on YouTube. Quite impressive. But almost a decade after the release of this Norwegian surprise, it's about time to answer their question. What does the fox say? Well, this fox says, ik heb gezegd.
Wow, that's also no protocol. It's time for change. I think that was one of the things that was said with your chair in supply chain innovation, and I think what you've managed to do is innovate on many different levels. I mean, you've content-wise demonstrated that innovation in your chair is possible in supply chain by giving all the different perspectives by the metaphors, by showing that co-creation in your projects is an essential element. But more interesting, I thought, was that you also, by doing that and implementing perspective-taking and co-creation in your inaugural address, sort of shook the assumptions of how that usually goes. By perspective-taking for the audience, you gave us the perspective of Bart, the passionate educator, Bart, the committed researcher in multidisciplinary projects, Bart, the definitely entertainer, and maybe even the seat of a rock star rocking the audience in the co-creation sense. So thank you very much. I think what you're going to do more in your chair is going to be even more promising than anybody could have imagined prior to this address. So before concluding this academic ceremony, I have a logistical announcement, and that is there will be drinks afterwards. And there's a tendency, a classical tendency for people to stand in line to form a reception line to congratulate. Please do not do that. Also innovate in that respect. And just let the professors in their traditional gowns do so, and then Bart will just walk around and talk to everybody. And I hereby officially close this academic ceremony.